And you're all set.
Thanks, Vanessa. Would you mind enabling screen sharing?
I'm actually going to make you the host now if you want.
Okay, sure, that'd be great. Okay, perfect. All right. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and Governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting, the Southborough Municipal Technology Committee, will be connected via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by the members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town of Southborough's website at southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting may do so by finding the meeting at southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means, YouTube streaming. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website and YouTube an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So call the meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. Thanks for everyone for joining us tonight. I can't recall, Larry, were you able to send out minutes from the last meeting?
No, I'm sorry. This meeting snuck up on me. I didn't even have it on my calendar until I saw your email this morning. I'm not sure how that happened. So I apologize, but I will write them up and I'll have both sets for the next meeting.
Sounds good. We'll do it in the January meeting. Great. Thanks. Yeah, I thought I had sent out a calendar invite to the MTC like a month ago.
Yeah, well, I usually put it on my calendar as soon as the previous meeting ends, and obviously I was just tired after the last meeting.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay. So as we've done in previous sessions, we've invited department heads, directors to join us for various discussions to discuss their particular needs, their particular department. Actually, this is actually one where Mr. Haggerty reached out to me and wanted to have a discussion on a particular topic, but I also wanted to take the opportunity to discuss with him, see how things are going technology-wise within the clerk's office as part of our overall discussion. So thanks for joining us, Jim.
Right. Thanks for having me.
So the first thing I want to discuss is this concept of requirements and technology for preservation of virtual meeting records under open meeting law. And so sort of taking a step back when we were in those good old days, some might say weren't good, but they're the old days certainly before coronavirus, when we were meeting in person, we were preserving records by, I think there's some background noise. So if you're not speaking, possibly switch off to mute.
Something about start video and never start any video. So I don't know.
Let's see who's.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay, so basically the way we would preserve meeting records would be, of course, the minutes for the meeting. And from my understanding of open meeting law, the minutes should be comprehensive enough so that somebody reviewing the minutes afterwards could have a good understanding of what was discussed in the meeting. Also, any documents that were presented, like on a projector or handed out in the meeting, should be included as part of the meeting record, so that they, somebody, if they had particular questions, they could do so. And the question came up, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is, if basically somebody shares their screen under a virtual meeting, and let's say they only intended to share a portion of it, like a particular document. Now, what needs to be done to meet the open meeting law to make sure that if it's arbitrary screen sharing? Is that the general question?
Yeah, but let me just back up one step.
Sure.
The open meeting law defines, the Attorney General has interpreted the use of the term "a document used at a meeting" to mean three specific things have to be met. One is that at the meeting, the document has to be mentioned by name, its contents have to be discussed, and the document or exhibit or what have you has to physically be present at the meeting. So that's been the standard in the past. And Matt's right that the minutes have to contain detail sufficient that a non-participant could reasonably know what took place, the actions, the votes taken. But the minutes are also supposed to maintain a list of those documents used at the meeting so they meet the three criteria. Southborough has a bylaw that I actually proposed a few years back that requires the clerk to maintain those, both the minutes and the documents themselves. Frankly, I just asked for it because I knew that a lot of boards and committees weren't maintaining the records, and it just made most sense to just have one person responsible, one place to go for everything. And now we take all those documents, we scan to a PDF, make them searchable for with the screen readers, and we post all that up on the web. We also keep a hard copy. We also have a copy we keep in two other places as well. So here's with it. So, and that also satisfies a public records request if somebody wants a document. So it ties three things in nicely. So here's the problem you have right now is that we don't have a physical world, yet we have documents that we're discussing in a meeting, but they're not physically present. You know, you may not have a piece of paper in front of you. We're all looking at a screen. So what does the Attorney General say about that? Is that still considered a document used in a meeting? And I reached out to them for a definition of that, just I'm trying to head something off at the past to ensure that we're following steps so that nobody can get back later on and say we, didn't do it properly. And frankly, their response was not very helpful. Essentially, they came back and said their test would be, is a document used differently at a physical meeting or a virtual meeting? I said, there is no such thing as a document in a virtual meeting. It's on a screen or it's on a computer, or it's on a whatever. How do we address this? And I got a non-answer from them. So,
Jim,
yes, sir.
I would just say that I'm shocked that you didn't get a helpful answer from the Attorney General. I too have gone to them trying to get some direction, and it's pretty much you don't get anything. So
well,
don't feel bad. Don't feel badly.
It's kind of hit or miss, and when you develop a relationship with some of the attorneys in there, you tend to get more than the company line. And but this is new. This is new ground, and whether we like it or not, we have a lot of committees that are meeting and living in this world, and sooner or later, somebody's going to file an open meeting law complaint. And then some attorney down the road is going to interpret the rules and then come back and said X. And I've checked high and low. I have not seen any guidance from the Massachusetts Clerks Association, nothing from the MMA, nothing from the big law firms that typically give guidance. So it's sort of on uncharted territory. So I wanted to talk to you guys to run this, get your thoughts on this tonight. And I've already talked to town council. Tomorrow morning, I'll be submitting a legal request to him to say that if we follow the procedure we talk about tonight, in his opinion, will that satisfy the open meeting law?
Hey, Jim, I would like to ask another question. I've been erring on the side of, including or trying to post all the documents that are mentioned and that are shown on screen or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is there a danger in going that far? I mean, is it better to err on the side of too much or too little?
That's the $64 question. Again, you'll not get a precise answer from the AG's office on that. But let's say we have a situation where if you have the document both in a physical sense and you wanted to include that, let's say you had the document and you put it up on a screen and you shared it, and then you sent that document to us and we posted that on the web and so forth, people see. I think that's terrific. But what do we do in a situation where a document isn't in a physical sense? For example, let's say you're reviewing a website. Let's say you're, or like in the case of the advisory committee, they're looking at ClearGov. They're, instead of looking at hard copies of budgets that they're discussing and making decisions upon, they're viewing a website. All right, so there is no physical document. Do we have to create a physical document?
So yeah, my response to all this, to me, it's the intent of the law is all about making sure that if somebody wasn't physically present in the meeting, they could travel back in time and they could listen in and watch and see what was discussed and understand at that particular point in time the documents that were discussed in that meeting. And to me, the recordings that are made on YouTube and preserved in perpetuity on YouTube that include
they're not.
So let me finish. Well, before you cut me off, the recordings that are maintained, and we can discuss how long they're maintained and whether they're preserved in perpetuity or how long the retention record is. That should be sufficient to meet the open meeting law intent, which is somebody can go back in time. Now, certainly websites, they do change. Like, a website somebody's reviewing or a meeting that a group would be reviewing today is going to change tomorrow. But the point is not to maintain, do a full capture of a website or, capture it to PDF or use a Wayback Machine to figure out what it was at a time. The point is to review what was reviewed in the meeting. And I believe that the capture of the video from the meeting serves that intent. So with that being said, Will, turn it over to you for your comment on, you said no. You're on mute.
My understanding is that there's no guarantee by YouTube that they're going to keep these videos forever. So, I guess, one thing would be to try and figure out if we could depend on them. And then the next point is, are they going to start charging us? Because, we're talking about a lot of space. Third point would be that we don't want to do this ourselves if we can avoid it, because maintaining video in some type of accessible format is tough and expensive. And, even if you pay somebody to do that, you're going to be talking about real money. I guess, back to Jim would be, is there any commonality or any common solution that's being discussed for this kind of issue of preserving videos and things?
Well, can I make a comment first?
Yeah.
It seems to me that there are a number of categories here, and as Matt was saying, or Matt's statement was that the goal is that somebody should be able to effectively have the same information as somebody who attended the meeting. What I've been doing in all of our minutes is including both the documents that we've discussed and only the documents discussed. Sometimes we will distribute a document for discussion and not discuss it at the meeting, in which case I don't include that in the minutes. I also include a list of URLs that we might be discussing at the meeting in that same section, that at the end, documents discussed or whatever. It seems to me that, and it is true that some URLs are sort of semi-permanent and some are sort of ephemeral, but it would seem to me that that doesn't really matter, because the same situation then exists for people who are at the meeting and people who are not at the meeting. If I'm at the meeting and we review a URL and our review and our discussion is on the video of the meeting in this case, then we all have some amount of information about that URL. If I post the URL and a week later it's gone or it's changed or whatever, that affects me as much as anybody else who's watching the video of the meeting. So I don't think that we can realistically capture all of the possible online information that we discuss at the meeting. It just doesn't seem like a realistic solution.
Larry, I agree with you 100% on that we can't, we really can't do that. But what I would say, though, is in the days before computers, if the rule that says that any document that's distributed at the meeting, well, first of all, if you wanted to discuss a document, you had to distribute a physical copy. And secondly, anything that was distributed at the meeting, was essentially frozen in time. You could pack that away and, with the minutes, pretty much you could reconstruct what was going on. I think your point is very valid that fundamentally, as we've let computers into the mix and the web into the mix, it's no longer feasible at all to freeze in time what the committee was discussing. And I don't think the law has really kept up with that.
It's correct. It hasn't. You're absolutely right.
it seems to me that the fact that we're currently, and I don't know if this is a long-term situation, but the fact that we're currently using Zoom for these meetings and recording all of these meetings and posting the recording, it seems like one way of dealing with it is simply to ensure that any content that is not available as a physical file, like there were 2 or 3 files that were distributed before this meeting. Angela distributed one, Matt distributed one. Those are things that can be included with the minutes, and anybody who looks at the minutes will be able to see those files. Anything that's not a physical file, for example, a website or a YouTube video, if we simply have the rule that anything like that that's discussed at the meeting must be on the screen at the meeting. In other words, if there's a YouTube video we're talking about, we need to play the YouTube video at the meeting so it's recorded as part of the meeting. If there's a website that we're looking at and discussing details about, like it was a smart city website that we were looking at several meetings ago, then that website needs to be part of the video of the meeting. And at that point, some person who comes in and watches the video of the meeting later has the same information as the people who were at the meeting, no more, no less. And we're not responsible for trying to maintain an archive of every YouTube video ever viewed at one of our meetings.
Completely agreed.
Larry, I'd make one addition to what you just said. What's interesting is that if you just think about the days of voice recordings, right? So you're going to record the meeting, and then you have that recording. That was not included as part of the minutes or as part of the documents. That recording, I actually, with permission, of course, I make recordings at the meetings I go to where I'm going to have to take minutes because I can't really write and read my notes anymore. So what I do is, I take a full recording and then I listen to that sometimes 4 or 5 times. To extract all of the, the points that were made and to write some good minutes for it, I hope. But my understanding is that recording is for my purposes only, and I don't have to worry about that being a public record. It's not something that was discussed at the meeting. And it's not really supposed to be an official document.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is when we get into the video portion, when we get into the shared screen portion, then suddenly that changes, right? Because people can read the document on the screen.
Yeah, personally, I feel like the fidelity of the document retention has dramatically increased since we moved to video recording. I mean, can you imagine trying to reconstruct what was discussed based on minutes and a couple of shared documents in a folder? When before we weren't even doing audio recording, let alone video recordings. Now we're basically adding video recordings and audio recording. I mean, it's a full recording. To me, the intent of the law is being met so much better now that we have video recordings, and then we are just discussing on the screen. I agree with Larry that if we're going to be discussing something, we should pull up on the screen and share it, and so it memorializes it as part of the video record. And we should definitely look at we can definitely look into YouTube's policy. From my understanding, they do not have, unless it's infringing content, that is against their their policy. They have no auto deletion of videos. In terms of the capacity of YouTube servers, there's no way Southborough could ever produce anything that would be more than a drop in the bucket for them in terms of the amount of terabytes and petabytes of storage that they maintain from tons and tons of content providers. So it's nothing for them, and their ability to provide that content and be able to retain the content in distributed data centers with high availability, high durability, is so much better than anything we could do as a town. So,
well, one question I'd like to direct to Jim, maybe he knows the answer, and that is, how long do minutes and documents have to be retained?
Minutes have to be retained forever.
I don't think that's at all reasonable. You're telling me.
I agree with you, but that is what the state law requires, and that's why I made us responsible for it 4 years ago, because I knew people weren't doing it.
Well,
agendas only have to be retained for a year. but minutes are supposed to be retained in perpetuity.
Okay, so suppose we have minutes from meetings in 1761. Are we going to go back and change the spelling
No.
that they used?
No, believe it or not, that there are some documents from that far back. There really
Well,
are.
I'm going to record now. Given that this meeting is being recorded, I'm speaking directly to my great grandchildren right now, because I know under Massachusetts law they have to be able to see this. No, I think that's going to be that's an open question we should ask. But essentially, storage is free, and there is little incentive to actually delete anything. So we can check with YouTube on the retention. We can look if YouTube for some reason doesn't provide the retention, that the town can meet. We can certainly take those videos off or copy them over to some other cloud service that does for a very minimal cost. So I don't think that's a huge that's not much of an issue, because storage is practically free nowadays. Cloud storage, which
Well, one thing I'd point out is that Google is now, on the verge of being sued, left, right, up and down for antitrust, and maybe split up in some respect. And, that is an issue you should keep in mind. I guess the other thing I'd say that we should never touch with a 10-foot pole is Facebook, right? That should never be an official record for the town, simply because of the way that they operate.
So yeah, even if YouTube is, every company has lawsuits going against them. I'm not going to comment on any of that, but certainly YouTube, even if they get sued, they're not going anywhere. And if they were going somewhere, we could easily download. In fact, I have a program on my PC right now. You can feed it a YouTube playlist, and it will download all of the videos in the playlist and to whatever destination you want. So we can easily transfer them to a different platform if somebody's using YouTube. We're going somewhere, but it's not.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt to Matt's point that if we decided that any website discussed on the call, we needed to download a web archive of and make that part of the permanent record. Any YouTube video that we discussed in the meeting, we would download, and there's lots. I mean, I also have a YouTube downloader. There's lots of software to download YouTube videos. If we did that, the size of those in general would be much smaller than the size of the video that we're recording for this 2-hour meeting anyway. So we're not actually talking about a substantial increase in storage, and storage is, for the most part, free. So if that were to be the decision, that wouldn't scare me at all. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so let me try to put a bow around some of this here. So if we say that if something is discussed at a meeting and is not in a physical format, i.e. a website, video, or any item displayed virtually, the chairman of the committee must ensure that the screen is shared so the visual display of the document is recorded and preserved. Does that seem like a general fair statement?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's get to the second piece about that would be, and I'm agree with, I think that this goes far beyond any guidance we're receiving or absence of guidance we're receiving from the state, but I think it covers the bases and gives people a much better record of what occurs than what has been done in the past. The second piece gets into storage. Currently, it's stored on YouTube. Do we want to continue to do that, or do we want to go and record it on Zoom, or do we want to, I go through the process to download it from YouTube and store it locally? I'm uncomfortable leaving it on YouTube.
We can say keep a copy somewhere else.
Okay.
And as long as we say it's diverse, it doesn't. We don't have to prescribe where it is, but as long as we keep a copy somewhere else, whether it be Zoom or be some other cloud system, I don't think we should store it locally. I think it should be some cloud service.
Well,
Okay.
I think it should
But nonetheless,
be
if you
stored
show,
the same place.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it should be stored the same place that we store documents that we distribute. If Will sends a doc file out before the meeting, that's stored somewhere, because I provide that to Amy when I provide the minutes.
Right.
Wherever that's stored, we should be storing the MP4 files or the MOV files or whatever we get from YouTube in the same place. Point to them in the minutes as documents used at the meeting, and and make everything consistent. I mean, you know, bits are bits.
Gotcha.
Completely agreed. We probably do need to work with, once we get a new town IT person, to make sure that that location is not on-prem on a local drive. So I have a
But
feeling
that's
it
a
might
separate
be
issue. I mean,
Well,
that's a separate issue.
the location of storage is a separate issue from what are we storing.
Completely agree.
Yeah, but I'm in the same boat with Larry here in the sense that I take minutes for a couple committees. He takes minutes for this committee. Is it going to be our responsibility then to go back and record, move, or download these YouTube videos, into this archive?
No, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it
it's gonna
all.
be done centrally. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do
Okay.
it all. And the I don't know the size limitation. I know there is a size limitation for files to be uploaded to the company that maintains the town website, including the minutes and agenda. So it's not stored on our servers, but I know there is a size limitation. So
Yeah, I don't think we'd use the town website to store them. I think we'd use some other cloud service.
right, we can make that work. Okay, this sounds good. I'll run this by town council and just come up with something. Again, it's you have a wide range of technical abilities and desire to toe the line, so to speak, amongst all the 60 some odd different boards and committees we have. And honestly, I'm not the lifeguard. I'm just trying to keep a lot of trouble. So if you follow these things, you'll be okay. If you don't follow them, you won't be so okay.
Jim, when you ask this question, could you also ask about audio recordings?
In what sense?
Well, I'm hoping that audio recordings will be excluded from this rule. Like I said, with permission, it's in what the document that's read out, but I'd make audio recordings of meetings that I'm going to have to do the minutes for. If I make that recording, does that mean that I've essentially automatically made a record?
No, you have not, unless you share it with somebody, and then it becomes a public record.
Okay, good.
And there's also a specific case law that refers to recordings and other things that are used to help people create draft of minutes. But you're perfectly, as long as you don't share that, you're good to go.
So with respect to the previous discussion, it seems that if people taking minutes pretty much were to follow the approach that I've been taking, and that is in the documents use section, in addition to the actual documents that we distribute, doc files or whatever, if we simply list URLs of any websites or YouTube videos used at the meeting, then the right thing should happen in post-processing, so to speak. That what you need are the URLs, and once you have the URLs, you can capture that information and store it wherever you're storing it.
No. If you give us a list of URLs, we would simply list the URLs. We wouldn't then go out and try to capture what was on the URL when we looked at it, because it could be 6 weeks after the fact. It would be different. What we would capture would be the screen that was shared here that would show the version that you saw of the URL at that time.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So we're not actually downloading anything from YouTube then. We're just capturing the Zoom meeting and
exactly.
playing it in the Zoom meeting. Okay,
Exactly.
that makes perfect sense. Sure.
Yeah, I think our discussion of the downloading from YouTube was if that were the authoritative copy and we wanted to copy it down for to store some secondary service. Now, I personally, again, believe that YouTube is not going anywhere, and we could have that could be our primary. But if you want to have additional copy, that's perfectly fine. We could do it on OneDrive or whatever cloud service we want to. But yeah, we definitely don't want to. I'm not saying we're going to store a copy of all the URLs. It's
Jim, maybe I'm wrong. I thought that all of our meetings were accessible to private citizens through YouTube.
They are, but I don't control that video. I don't control that audio, and I have maybe I'm putting my hat on for my prior career. That I don't trust something that I can't control, and I can't measure the integrity of that file. I can't run a checksum on that video.
The town IT administrator does.
Yeah, but my question would be: suppose I wanted to go, look at the recording of this meeting on Zoom, right? Where would I go?
Right now, you could click on the town link; it would point you to YouTube.
Okay. So it's being stored on YouTube.
Yes.
But I assume that the town must have its own. I'm assuming the town must have its own copy of that video other than just on YouTube.
It does not.
Oh, that sounds like a major problem
And
to
that's
me.
exactly. That's one of the reasons we're here. I want to have something that we control that we can make it work.
So the town IT administrator does control the YouTube channel, Southborough Remote Meetings channel, and this is these are all of there's 36 subscribers, and all of the content here are controlled exclusively by the IT administrator.
Mhm.
And basically, the IT administrator determines when new videos are stored here and when they're deleted, how long they're retained, what's accessible. And of course, it's fully accessible to everybody on the internet, and people can subscribe to the channel. So in terms of actual control and determining what's available, what's not, who's available to, it is fully under the governance of the town and nobody else.
Right, but YouTube is a video distribution and playing site. It's not a storage facility in the sort of normal sense of, say, S3 or OneDrive or one of those. It's a different kind of site. And if YouTube determined that a video was corrupt, then the video is corrupt and they might stop serving it or whatever. It seems to me that the town should have a single authoritative copy in its own storage facility, and that can be a cloud. I'm not saying it needs to be on site,
Sure.
but something that's an authoritative storage facility with 5 nines of resilience and all of that. And I don't think that's what YouTube is.
YouTube actually does have like 5 nines. So I'm not arguing either in terms of what we really need to do. Look at the SLA of YouTube to see what privileges and basically what service offering do they have. I do know that they have a lot higher number of nines availability in terms of the number of drives than anything we could run as a service ourselves.
Oh,
not
sure.
arguing that we shouldn't consider something like an S3 or a OneDrive, that it's purely a block storage or object storage service that we have 100% control over, as opposed to a video set. But people are using YouTube as a video archive. I mean, but not saying it's something we should rely on. But
I think the key thing you said, Matt, was that we need to look at their SLA.
Laura, Laura.
Like if they have any control, if there's any case that they could delete something, or that we would not have control over it, then absolutely we need it. So it's something we could easily review. And
Yeah, actually, that brings up another issue, which is that Jim, it sounds like you and your minions are going to be in absolute control of whatever this archive is. That you'll be the only ones who add things to it and also could delete things from it.
And they would ask him for an
Yeah.
advice.
Okay.
Correct.
that's the way it should be. Yeah. And that's the way, like I say, it is on the YouTube channel. Like I don't, whoever in town IT has access to that, the credentials for that YouTube channel, and only they have access to it. Same thing with Zoom itself. In Zoom, you can retain meetings within Zoom service. And so it's basically the people, the employees who have access to the Zoom credentials that have access to that archive. And only they can change it. So, yeah. But I mean, this does bring up, sort of longer term discussion. And Jim, you and I have discussed, I think, a year and a half back about the idea of so we still have tons of records in the basement of the townhouse.
Yep. That
someday in the horizon it would be nice to scan and put onto a object storage service. And like I say, the cost of storage nowadays is infinitesimal. It's almost free. So it'd be great to get them out of a lot of those physical documents out of the basement and onto some nice long-term archival storage system. And maybe we decide, to use something like S3 or or Glacier, which is a ultra long storage item with 7 nines of availability or 9 nines of durability. Yeah.
Jim, this physical archive you have, you're still adding to it right now, right?
Yes, there are some documents that we have to retain in a physical sense, and However, we are converting a lot of our documents to PDFAs.
Okay, I mean, so you're not going to run out of space soon, I guess is what you're saying.
Oh, no. If you'd like to take a walk in, I'll be happy to show you. It is, I don't know that I could fit another shoebox in the basement or in my vault. And literally, I'm at the point that I'm going to have to take some of our oldest documents out of my so-called vault and pay for a commercial storage service because we can't control the environmental conditions in that room.
Are there documents that you could have scanned by a firm so that you wouldn't have to deal with the physicality of them anymore?
We have actually just completed that process for all of our births, deaths, and marriage records for the past 100 years. We've done that ourselves, working with a vendor outside. Yeah, so we've done a lot of that.
So I mean, I'm just wondering if, if you get to the point where you're, have to pay for a vendor to keep the physical documents, that begins to get pretty expensive too.
It does, but unfortunately, a lot of these documents are handwritten documents when you get back more than 100 years old. And we literally have documents back to 1727. And there, I can tell you that 4 times in the 5.5 years I've been a clerk, I've had to literally go back through every town meeting from the last one all the way back to the very first one to ensure that no activity was taking place, sort of to prove a negative. Drives me bananas.
I actually did that once. There was some subdivisions going on that were making some claims, and I actually went to the library and they had the record books from the town meeting of 1860. Yep. And I got to read the entire section on this particular road that was in question. All handwritten, of course.
Well, we've gone back for the past 100 years, with just under 100 years for town meetings and minutes to separate those. We're about 99% of the way there. And all those we'll be able to put up on the town website within the next couple of months. So we have restrictions on the births, deaths, and marriages for certain privacy issues, but we should be able to have all town meeting and then all the warrants and so forth up there for people to search.
Is there a way that you can scan handwritten documents such that you don't have to retain the handwritten document?
Well, you can't have it searchable. It's not going to recognize that. And unfortunately, some of these are so faded. I'll be going to the CPC hopefully next year to see if I can have some of these documents, see if we can have a preservation company, see if there's a way for them to enhance. I know there's techniques with infrared photography and other stuff to see if there's a way for us to bring back some of the fading on these documents.
I don't think they're searchable right now in their handwritten form, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think the general theme is the faster we can digitize these and preserve them in, literally in perpetuity, because storage is free and it's getting even cheaper than free. Someday somebody's going to pay you to store things on them. But the idea is that the faster we can get them digitized so that they're truly preserved so that the ink doesn't fade, then the easier they will be to maintain over time. We won't have to keep the physical records. And yes, as Will mentioned, today, if you want to search something, you have to read over it. And tomorrow, if it's digitized, you still have to read over it if it's handwritten. But that doesn't. I think the big question is legally, if we digitize, let's say we took every document out of the basement of the townhouse and send it to a commercial company to have digitized with high fidelity, with all of the infrared or whatever techniques we wanted to, and truly created a permanent digital archive in a much better digital location with high, basically geo-distributed, you have copies in multiple data centers, et cetera. Would we be allowed under law to destroy or to dump the original documents?
No, there are specific rules that prohibit you from getting rid of documents more than so many years old. We cannot.
How many years is that? Do you know?
In some cases, it's 75 years. In some cases, it's less than that. Okay. It's very, some of the things are very restrictive.
We shouldn't feel too bad. My understanding is that in England, they have documents that go back well over 1,000 years in some cases. that they're still retaining and people still look at for all kinds of purposes.
Yeah. By the way, we do have microfilm copies of these documents going back to the 1700s. So at least we have that.
Of course, nobody has a microfilm reader anymore, but
I'm
saying that in jest. I'm sure you do.
No, Larry, I will tell you, when I started and I opened up the box of microfilm and I saw that we had paid a company a fortune to microfilm all these documents, I said, well, who tested the documents? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, when we paid for this, who put them on a reader and verified, just did a sample to ensure they're done properly? And they didn't. And I'm old enough to remember going to use microfilm readers in libraries and stuff for college projects and such, and used to press a button and it would stop. Well, there's something called a splib that was put one splib between each frame to define the frames and two splibs to between the chapters. And I looked at the microfilm and I said, I don't see any splibs on here. So I called the vendor that did the work. I said, how come there aren't any splibs on here? He said, well, nobody asked for them. I said, nobody asked for them. I said, well, when you buy a car, do you ask that you get lug nuts on the tires? I mean, is there an extra cost to do splibs? No. So we have one continuous all the way through. So we've actually gone through in the past year and had almost all of those documents then converted, also then had a PDF made of these microfilm, just to give us something a little bit more. But and when I asked the vendor, well, what if I did want to look at a microfilm reader, where would I go to borrow one? They said, oh, you can come up to Vermont and use ours anytime you want. And they were serious. So it's an interesting world we live in, trying to get into the modern ages, but we're making progress.
So this all falls under the general, one of the open things we're working on in our general strategy as a town, long-term strategy of where we want to move towards. And this is, we fall under, I would bucket this under security. Security includes integrity and availability and durability, et cetera. And moving towards digital preservation is going to be much lower cost and higher fidelity, higher durability, et cetera. So we'll have to definitely need to continue the discussion. So I know we've taken a lot of time discussing this. Are we good so far? Good on the open meeting law discussion, Jim? For that,
yeah, very helpful. I'll shoot this off to Aldo Cipriano tomorrow and get his opinion on it, and then we'll move forward, and hopefully this will keep us all out of trouble.
Sounds good. How is everything else going in your department? Anything regarding technology? I do think we should start up a work stream or discuss with you about various different documents. In fact, there was, back with Tom, we discussed the idea that for each, we need to start classifying our documents, right? And the class of documents, the buckets the documents would fit in, would determine the security policy in terms of how the access control, the preservation, the amount of durability of the document, how long it needs to be retained, et cetera. So the variety of, basically the bucket that we place a particular document in would determine its various different attributes of how long we retain it, and the security attributes, how we protect it, et cetera. So that's something that I think that Tom and I had started creating those buckets a month before he resigned. And we'll probably wait until our next IT administrator comes in and continue up with that process. So it's going to be fun, but definitely look forward to working with you.
Well, the retention piece of it is actually defined by the state already in the Secretary of State's guidelines, and we're pretty good about destroying things when we're allowed to. I don't think the town had ever gotten rid of the registration cards for deleted voters. We really didn't know. I mean, I'm old enough to know when somebody was an unenrolled voter and they voted in an election, they automatically were enrolled in the party they chose and back and forth. And we literally had 15 cards for people. And who cared that, 37 years ago, they chose a Democratic ballot in a primary and then went back to, unenrolled. And we had 9 banker boxes of records that we destroyed. It took a while to get some seniors to help us do that, but it's a step in the right direction. But anyway, I digress.
That's great.
And the other aspect, of course, is that if you can digitize many of these documents and define life cycles for different classes of document, a lot of it can be automated. Like I use S3 for all of my personal stuff, and S3 for any given bucket, you can basically say, okay, keep it in standard storage for this long, then move it to infrequent storage, then move it to Glacier. Then after 10 years, delete it And I don't have to worry about it. It just happens. And that's one of the benefits of being able to define life cycles for different classes of documents.
Yeah.
How much do you pay for that?
Glacier is pretty cheap. Glacier for regular storage is down around 2 cents a gigabyte a month. And then Glacier, which is their, most infrequent tier, is like a few tenths of a cent per gigabyte per month. So, I store terabytes of stuff, and I'm paying like $7 a month or something. It's really very cheap.
Yeah, that 0.4 cents per gigabyte per month. And there's actually, there's a few different tiers even under Glacier.
Yeah.
There's a Glacier infrequent access. It's meant to be accessed maybe once or twice a year. That's even a fraction of that cost. So effectively, it's practically.
And you can actually, like I said, for each bucket, you can actually set up rules that say, move from here to here to here to here at 90 days, at 180 days, at 360 days, at 5 years, whatever. And it's all automated. So you basically, and I'm not pushing Glacier. I mean, lots of storage facilities have this kind of life cycle capability. But the point is that if you can define life cycles for different classes of document, and you can store the documents digitally, then at some point you just stopped having to manage them, and you let the storage system manage them.
Yeah, Glacier Deep Archive is 0.09 cents. So not 9 cents, but 0.09 cents, or 10 1/100ths of a cent per gigabyte per month. So, I mean, it's practically free. And it's deep art, so it is highly durable, etc.
But they do charge you, the difference is they charge you a fortune if you need to get it.
Yeah,
where fortune is variable.
Fortune is a matter of 10 cents or, yeah.
Right, the deeper you store it, the more they charge you to actually get it back. And that's why they can afford to do that, because they're not being asked to retrieve it very often.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, how are other things going, Jim, in terms of technology, in terms of your department?
Good. We all just survived the election, which, like I say, unfortunately, I fell and hit my head and missed the election. But life is good. We reconciled everything. I have to tell you that the changes to the election laws that the state put out last July, there were, I think, 14 or 15 stakeholders that came up with a compromise. And anytime you have that many people involved in the decision, boy, you get a mess. And we sure as heck did. And the manual effort involved in this election would blow your socks off. I think I did the math that town clerks throughout the state had to put 20 million labels on envelopes manually, all right, which is obscene in this world to be doing that. And for us alone, it was 20,000. And even just the design, I've talked to the state about a redesign of the postcards they send out. I mean, simple things like, we try to have some high school and college kids help us with stuff with the COVID issues and stuff like that, and trying to sort these postcards when they came back from people. What you learn quickly is that high school and college kids don't know how to sort things anymore. They just don't. And it's like giving them a rotary telephone. They just don't. But then just the design of these cards, the way they come back, you can't tell when looking at the cards. So how you sort something that comes back as, Mary Jones Smith. Is Jones Smith an unhyphenated last name? Is it a middle name? Is it not? And we're trying to compare that came back as first, middle, last against a computer printout that is sorted last, comma, middle, first. So I know that myself, I went through 3,737 postcards manually 3 times to ensure that we did all these properly, to ensure that we got all the everybody that requested a ballot got that ballot. And we had the manual effort of stuffing these ballots for the presidential, for the state election in November. We had 22 people in the office for about 6 or 7 hours on a Saturday to put up together. And just as a side here, to give some thank you to the post office, as much as you hear the difficulties they have in getting stuff out today and some of the stuff politically in the election, I can't say enough good things about the Southborough postmaster. That I brought down those 3,700 envelopes to him at 4:30 on a Tuesday morning. And we arranged that instead of him sending those to the distribution center in Boston, which would have cost a couple of days, he brought people in early. So they hand sorted all those that morning and they were delivered to all Southborough residents that Tuesday morning. They just
Wow.
incredible local support. I just can't say enough good things about them.
Bravo.
But,
That's amazing.
they really did a great job. But everything went well. We had no computer glitches. We had no, we had a good backup plan in place, which helped when I wasn't there. Everything went well, and we're already planning for the next go around and the additional changes they make into the election laws. It's a wild time.
Are there things within the scope or flexibility of the election laws that could be done via technology to simplify?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. But just back up for a second, and just to put this into context, the state voter information system is written in COBOL, okay? And it was written in 1992. So they do have an RFP out for a new system, but to say it's archaic is incredible. We have to enter data manually multiple times into the same system because different parts of it don't talk to one another. It's lunacy. And, we're dealing with 7,700 give or take registered voters in Southborough. I don't know how in the world a place like Boston or Brockton or Lowell, I'll tell you straight up, they absolutely cannot be following all the rules required by the election law changes last year. They can't do it. It's just insurmountable. But they are receptive to changes. Whether or not those will get through. One thing that drives me bonkers every day is that when somebody goes to the registry of motor vehicles to renew their driver's license, the system automatically re-registers them to vote. So it's set up by default that unless you tell them you don't want to register to vote, you'll be registered to vote, assuming that you're a citizen and over 18. All right, fine, I get it. But if Jim Hegarty goes in and Jim has been a voter for a long time and he's still at the same address and still goes by the same first, middle, and last name, it hasn't changed its party affiliation, that system ought to be dropped when it goes from the RMV to the state. It should say it's a duplicate, call it a day. It is not. It gets passed to us. We have to accept it as a duplicate, match it up with an existing record, print out a piece of paper as a confirmation to mail out to Jim Hegarty to say, congratulations, you're a registered voter in Southborough. And then we have to pay the postage to mail it out. And then we have to deal with a phone call when he calls up and says, hey, wait a minute. I've been a registered voter here since 1992. Why did I get this piece of paper? It is lunacy. And beyond that, you have people that'll, they live on, I don't know, Lover's Lane. And when they go to the registry of motor vehicles, they will enter their address as Lover's Road. Happens all the time. And so I've talked to the programmers of the state and said, listen, why don't you just use the same software that, why do you allow people to create an address that doesn't exist? Why not use the same software the post office puts out there that if it isn't an address they recognize, it doesn't work?
Address validation software.
Yeah, and they're like,
brand new as of 2000. Why are we still using that?
And the response was, well, this wouldn't help kids in college. I said, actually, it might. But I mean, I this kind of stuff drives you bonkers. And but we're trying to work through it, and they have a incredibly difficult job. And to be perfectly blunt, it's not very high up on their agenda of things they're dealing with. Because we do the work, they don't. It's what it comes down to.
Yeah, so the question is, are there things we can do within the scope of the law at a local level, with the existing system? We're not going to change their COBOL, their Mini, their mainframe, whatever they have up there. Yeah. But are there things we can do to help alleviate and assuage the manual work at our level when these large things come up, that we have to do a lot of manual work? Are there things we can do that via technology just at our level?
No, we bought and tested a whole bunch of, for example, automatic letter openers. We threw away the state scanners to have scanners that would mount on a desk. So it's a much faster process. We're 60% faster doing it our way than the state way. We've done little things like that. We have, we're very fortunate to have a lot of not only the latest tabulators for the elections, but we also have spares. And I was actually able to procure 2 more. They cost $5,200 a piece. I was able to buy 2 more of them for $200. Kind of a long story, but
do you get them off of eBay by chance?
No, it turns out that the state had leased a whole bunch of these for towns to use in early voting. And then I contacted the vendor. I said, all right, now that you have these used devices, how do you sell them? And they were like, well, I said, let's put me on the list for these. And I said, I'd like to talk to you when the price comes out. And they said, all right, we negotiate a price of $100 a piece. Sign me up for 2 of them. So,
awesome.
It's just a good thing to have. And I find a place to store them. But you know what? If a device fails on election day, I can just plug it right out and save me, waiting for a vendor to come up for 45 minutes. So no, we're in really good shape. I can't think of anything from a technology perspective that would help us on those things.
Hey, Jim, what your description, I think is fantastic. Basically what you're describing, as far as I see it, is good reasons not to have centralized technology services that handle, across towns, that essentially deprive the town of the ability to innovate and to make some of its own choices, simply because, as you said, a central authority making it better may be very low on their priority list, right?
It is, yeah, because again, they don't have a dog in the fight. They're not spending the money. One of the things I suggested to them is that we have 351 cities in town in Massachusetts, and instead of having, there were literally 7 different pieces of paper that went into it, the form to be mailed to somebody with a ballot. So 5 different envelopes really involved in this process. So I said, why don't you set this up that they're all pre-labeled by town? We're responsible to enter our data into the computer, and I know it'd be a warehousing issue for you. Instead of having, just umpteen boxes, you have 351 different boxes. It comes out to me already pre-labeled. And they say, well, what if your data is wrong? I said, shame on me. I have to relabel them. But you just saved literally 20 million. It was a hell of a good time to own stock in Avery Labels. I'll tell you that, Avery Labels. But to your point, they don't have a dog in that fight, so it doesn't cost them. So I don't know, but I don't know. It's frustrating, but it's we're a lot better off than some other towns. We are, so we're in good shape.
Well, thank you for all your work on that. That I can't imagine going through that, but from me as a user of the town services and the election, the mail-in ballots, it went flawlessly, and I appreciate all of the great labor you and the staff put into that. So, thank you.
Thanks. All right. Well, thanks for having me tonight.
Larry, do you have a comment?
Oh, no, I was just saying it did go smoothly, at least from the point of view of a voter.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for joining us tonight. And let's definitely stay in touch. And would love to continue our discussion with you about the documents, retention, digitization, be it both the physical copies as well as any microfiche, microfilm, digitized, and moving that forward. So
great.
Let's just discuss that in the future.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
Okay. We don't have actually. So the town is currently interviewing for replacement for the IT director, replacement for Tom. And I know that several people in the committee helped Tom before he left with some of the documents, helping him, some volunteer service, getting some of the documents up to speed and up to date. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for spending time on that. And I think like cyber resiliency planning, that cyber resiliency plan is basically put on hold until we have a replacement. MTC processes, we don't have Jeff here. We have still yet to have a full complement of MTC committee members in one meeting, so we can. There's a particular document that we need as a full group to approve. I think that's the volunteer/contractor document. Basically, the form we would give volunteers/contractors, consultants, I think, consultant agreement. And we have a draft of that, but we need a whole committee to review and approve that. So I'm going to hold off on that. So with that being said, I'd like to move on to the strategic tech plan. and followed by surveys, and a surveys is basically a component thereof. So that being said, I'll turn the time over to Angela, who's done some great work putting together a new draft of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, let me make sure you can. Try it now. You should be a co-host.
Yeah, I can. All right. Can I just confirm that everyone can see my screen?
Confirmed.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's see. I don't know if anyone had a chance to read it before the meeting, or if we need to step through in a little bit more detail. Can I just ask Larry and William, did you have an opportunity to read it? I know it came out quite a few hours just before the meeting.
I've been through it once. I do have some comments, but I haven't had a chance to go through it more carefully.
Okay. I just saw it about an hour before the meeting, and I skimmed through it quickly, but didn't necessarily absorb very much of it on the first pass.
All right, then let me just kind of go through and talk about kind of what's changed at a high level, and then we can go through in some more detail. So there's a few things that are additions to the document. The first is linking the tech strategy to the town master plan. So I went back and spent some time with the town master plan. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, to me, it made sense that the technology strategy was linked to the master plan, basically enabled the master plan. So I looked for opportunities where we could, take the content of the master plan and actually look at what can the technology strategy do to drive those goals and those objectives forward. So that was one inclusion.
Do you want to go over all of the changes first and then discuss them, or do you want to discuss them as you?
I can summarize them and then we can go back and talk about each of them. Would that work?
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay. The second thing was looking at an overview of our current tech inventory. So I met with Tom before he left, and we kind of walked through the state of the current tech inventory. And I included a section just kind of on, I didn't want to go into detail because I didn't want to divulge any of our proprietary information. That's all included in Tom's documents, but more at a high level overview. What should we be thinking about with the current state of our technology inventory, and how does that impact the strategy? We added in the sections that we've been talking about moving to a more data-driven approach, updated the timelines, and then there's a lot of stuff that's the same in the current draft as in the original draft, with going through all the technology trends as well as the key metrics components. So this is definitely a first draft. I think one of the things that we were thinking about is the next step would certainly be going out and getting feedback on this draft. But let me go back. Matt, did you want to talk about some of the key changes before we dive into the document?
Yeah, well, I'd just love to discuss those high level. So, first of all, I love the idea of linking to the master plan, because there should be some linkage or some, I mean, there needs to be a relationship between the town's goals, master plan, and what we're doing at a technology level. The technology should be an enabler as well. So I was previously on the master plan committee, and I ran out of time. And so basically our committee has a representative we delegate to the master plan committee. And so we elected a couple months ago Will to replace me on the master plan committee. So he's been joining. And I know that Sam Stivers is also on the master plan committee. I think the master plan committee itself is looking for not necessarily a full, I'd love to get Sam's thoughts on this, I think the master plan committee is not looking for a full parent-child relationship, but possibly more of a sibling relationship where this technology strategy itself should not just be viewed as purely an enabler for the town long-term strategy, but possibly it should be helping influence the town long-term strategy. Because of these technology trends, this should, this is what the town strategy should be. Obviously changes in whatever remote, commuting, or remote meeting attendance, or changes in our lives due to technology. So yeah, but I'd love to, Sam. I don't know if Sam, if you have any comments or thoughts on that. Let me allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself if you want to.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think, Angela, a great point to connect these. And I guess I'd offer a few sort of higher level comments about what I see as being useful out of this master plan process, and how this might reinforce and enhance what we're trying to do with the master plan. One of the things we've been trying to do with master plan is to do some longer term thinking than just the 10-year horizon that this is technically appropriate for. And this is a little bit pie in the sky, but one of the things that at least has been on my list, and we've talked about a little bit, that I'm not sure how much traction it's going to get eventually, but the concept is if you run out 20 years or so and look at how the town ought to be operating or could be operating at that point, one of the things that's exciting for us is to think about the role that the schools could play in that, for example, is currently the place where most people are connected to the town through family relationships or whatever. And we have talked about things where you expand the town services, town connections, social interactions, et cetera, through the school process, in both longitudinally back into early learning, daycare ultimately, as well as long-term learning, and use that as a mechanism to connect with residents of the town and provide support for those who are interested in working with that. Obviously, there are privacy issues and so forth, but it seems that there is an opportunity to provide access to resources, whether they're educational resources, social service resources, et cetera, through an integrated communication system, database, et cetera. And to me, the technology is the enabler for all of that to happen. And so what we're trying to do is think of ways to maybe subversively, in some sense, plant the seeds for that, and to create some pressure through standards, principles, long-term objectives, or whatever, that both directly and implicitly encourage people to develop and spend resources in certain ways going forward. So, for example, I think about communications as part of a key element there in terms of being able to get people connected through some sort of mechanism to be able to reach, communicate with each other, et cetera, to include video access in a lot of places. I mean, I think we've learned a lot about Zoom through this pandemic that has been some very good features that are worth preserving. So thinking about those kind of things to alert people, make people aware of what's happening in town, what services are available to meet individual needs, how do I find common interest groups and activities, how can I find personal development, education opportunities, et cetera. And at the core of that is the ability to communicate and store data about individuals as people want to provide data to be accessible to others in there. And I think that then leads me, and you guys are far more knowledgeable about this stuff than I am, but things like having a principle that says we're going to use cloud-based resources for systems operation and data storage. Software as a service is a key element of what we might want to do. Some sort of standards for data collection and indexing going forward. Thinking about communications, we've had a lot of back and forth about radio communications. I got to believe radio ultimately is going to be dead, but who knows? But the issue to me, again, is thinking about, what kind of standards or objectives do we want to put in place? What can we say about GIS integration? We're way behind now in terms of town resources with that. I think there's an interesting role for that going forward. And as you folks were just talking with Jim, I think there's a real set of issues around document scanning and indexing and retention and access standards going forward. So my hope is that the work that you're doing out of the strategic planning process can feed some, I call them principles or whatever, into the master plan activity. And I'm very interested and will work with Will to try to get as much of that as we can into the master plan, at least as a placeholder, so people can refer to it and we can go back to it and talk about it. Sadly, the master plan from 2008 went on a shelf, and depending on how optimistic you are, there were like 250 objectives or something in there and 153 implementation steps. And I'm a bit of a pessimist. My count was that we'd done 4 of them, and others came up with 15 or 20. So there was far more effort in developing goals and objectives and implementation steps than there was in actual implementation effort, I think, which is sad commentary. But the consultants made a ton of money on the plan. So what we're trying to do this time is, and having been a consultant and made a fair amount of money on consulting services, I'm a bit embarrassed about that observation. But one of our goals this time is to actually skinny down on the boilerplate and focus on things that we think we can accomplish over the next 5 or 10 years. And they may not be world-beating kind of things, but having some of these things that we think we can begin to lay the groundwork for that move us toward that longer-term vision, we can get pretty excited about. So again, I come back to the technology committee as a way to feed the right kind of information into the master plan process to say if we can pick 2, 3, 5 or whatever principles, objectives, standards that will be important. Sometimes I like it to think of it sort of starting the rock rolling down the hill a little bit. Once you sort of get it moving a little and teetering, once it starts, it begins to develop some momentum. And if you can nudge it in the right direction, you don't have to spend a lot of energy reinforcing it if it starts going there. So again, a lot of people are looking for direction out there. And if we can provide some of that when people have a choice about how they want to do X, Y, or Z, and there's a document that says, here's the town's policy or here's the town's objective, I think that can have an interesting impact on people's behavior going forward. So again, it is, as you've heard from Jim particularly, I very much enjoy hearing his stories of tales of woe at the state government level. We probably have a number of things to match that in our history, but I think you got to pick a few things and do what you can. And I think we've got a lot of good committees in town. I think we've got some good leadership around to begin to push on some of these things. So the more direction we can provide in a productive direction, I think would be very helpful. So again, I appreciate what you're doing and look to you for any input you can provide to help move us in the right direction on the technology side, which is, I think we all recognize, has been underfunded, underdeveloped for forever, basically. So I think there's a lot of momentum now, at least at the selectmen level and the advisory committee level, for funding some of the positions that folks have talked about historically, even in this very difficult financial time, I think. And again, fears of things like ransomware and so forth, I think are maybe a little dramatic, but very effective in getting people's attention. And I think the great insurance to avoid or mitigate the risk and at least be a harder target for some of those folks than our neighbors. So anyway, that's high level view. And again, appreciate any guidance you can provide to the master plan group, and I'll stay connected with Will to work to get that inserted into their process. Thank you.
Can I make a reaction to that?
Sure.
Please, yeah.
My experience has been that trying to create, let's say, a general purpose architecture that's going to encourage, your application development teams to develop good applications almost never works. And what does work, though, is that if you assemble a team that has a specific goals that they're going to implement, and they've got some type of budget, they've got some kind of constraints, they've got a timetable and you put some active technology people with them, you can do some wonderful things that will come in on time and come in on budget. And, you know, looking at the master plan, there are lots of great goals there. You know, one thing I would love to see in that plan, I don't know if I've seen it yet, is some type of methodology that says, okay, you know, after we publish this, you know, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick out, you know, X number of goals that we want to work on now. And we're going to put together implementation teams. They're going to look like this. And we'll get some technologists in there to make sure that, you know, if there's technology that would make what they're going to do or trying to do better, you know, and that would fit into the budget and the time schedule, great. But I'm less, based on the experience I had in my career, Sam, I'm a lot less sanguine about technology leading. I think technology as a partner is great. Technology behind is not the right answer either. I think technology as an active partner is really where we want to go.
I think that's what Sam is saying, is that technology is a partner. And the master plan, it's not necessarily a child-parent relationship, it's more of a sibling relationship. And I do like what Sam mentioned about ideas that we as in the committee, we should be helping influence the general principles. Certainly not any particular technologies and so forth, but the general principles that the town should be moving towards to keep up with technology for whatever we're doing. Things like cloud first, SaaS first, things like data driven. Data driven is, you know, that's a very generic term. It's not, you know, it's not being prescriptive about how it's built, but it's saying, no, we know that technology in general is becoming a strong enabler and allows us now to be much more data driven than we could have been, you know, 50, whatever number of years ago. So we are strong advocates of leveraging current technology like cloud, using that first, as opposed to using 20-year-old technology like on-prem. And we're strong advocates of being data driven in all of our decisions. And then, of course, then we'll let the particular goals be followed. And but each of the goals then could be matching up. You know, whatever system is being built or whatever decisions are being made, we can ask ourselves, is it data driven? Is it cloud first? You know, but using some of those high level principles, I like that idea of helping push as a committee to the master plan that those should be things we're driving. But I would love to get Larry and Angela's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with pretty much everything I've heard. I agree with Will that technology shouldn't lead. But the flip side is that when technology follows, then you end up with solutions, technical solutions where people have to enter the same information 10 times.
Like
So,
Jim,
yeah.
just give us an example.
Right. So, I mean, if you can say, well, you know, we're using technology, but I do see them effectively having to run in parallel. One of the questions I had, I'm looking at the list in the middle of the screen here where it says the master plan lays out specific goals across a number of key areas, including, and I guess the first question I had was, how long is the rest of that list? Is that most of the list, or is that just a small segment of it?
Those are the major categories, but within each of those categories, there were maybe like 20 specific things.
Because it seems to me that as we move forward with this process, and I very much like the idea of trying to link the master plan and the strategic plan together, because let's face it, the strategic plan has to have a reason. You know, we can't just say, well, we're doing a strategic plan because we think technology is neat. There needs to be something that's driving it. And I think the master plan is probably the right thing for that to be. And then taking that to the next level, it seems to me that one of the things that we would need to do as part of our thought process is to look down that list and pick the 2 or 3 areas in that list that we believe we can be most effective in terms of linking technology. One could easily come to the conclusion, and it might be the wrong conclusion, but we could come to the conclusion that focusing on open space and recreation is probably not the right place for us to focus a lot of our efforts, whereas municipal facilities and services might be, economic development might be. So it would seem to me that would probably be an important step for us in terms of, obviously we can't focus the strategic technology plan across the whole realm of that. That's just too big certainly this early in the process, that's just too big a chunk. But if we identified the 2 or 3 major areas of the plan where we thought technology could be most effectively deployed to increase the efficiency or effectiveness of those areas, then I think that could be a really good way of linking the 2 together.
I think our previous plan was focused mostly on municipal facilities and services, right? We were talking about number of printers. Like our goal should be to reduce, not increase.
And as nice as that is, that the impact on real people is relatively low.
Completely agreed. So I love this thought.
Yeah. Just one thing I'd say is that I think we should be stressing linking technology to implementation. The terms that are being thrown around, like data-driven and cloud-based and all of that, those are great terms that technology professionals understand, and they you can say that to them and they'll say, okay, I'll go do this instead of that. I don't know if they mean much to people like most of the people on the master planning committee. And I don't know if, to tell you the truth, if they're necessarily correct, except until you give me a context as to, okay, we want to implement this with this kind of scope, with this kind of time frame, with this kind of budget. What can you do for us? And in that case, yes, then technology should be right in there. So, one thing I'd like to see emphasized, not only in the master plan for technology, but also in the master plan for the town, is how we're going to move this from just a lot of words on paper that's going to sit very nicely on the shelf into actually activity. Actually, somebody saying, okay, we're going to do this, let's go get it done. That's the only thing that's going to differentiate the 2020 master plan from the 2008 master plan, if we do that. If we don't, and if we don't emphasize that, I think we'll end up with the 2008 master plan again.
Well, I think without the survey, that becomes kind of the key question is, what problems are we actually trying to solve? And I don't think we actually know yet what are the core things that we're trying to solve that, general Southborough residents are most concerned about. And we won't know that until we actually do the survey and get the data. Until then, we're really just guessing.
Well, I hear what you're saying and I agree with it, but I would say one thing. For instance, if we're talking about the police department or the fire department or DPW, I think they should take the lead in what they want to ask people about, not the technology committee.
Okay.
And I think that that the technology committee, obviously, once they've come up and they've decided, hey, this is a big problem for us, that we should be there immediately to help them brainstorm and figure out what could technology really do in this area, if anything. There's a lot of things that it can't, but I would just say that that the technology committee is not going to improve the police force or the fire department or the DPW or how people necessarily do their transactions. Unless it's going to be some other department that's actually going to take the lead, and we can be there to help. But I think we have to remember we will be there to help.
So I agree with your words, there to help. So the technology, we are the catalysts. We can be the catalysts. And the catalysts are not just a service desk, which we wait for people to come and say, we have a technology problem, how do we help? The catalysts are there as partners, and a true partner is one who goes and helps people understand what the problems are and what are the current solutions that are available to them without waiting for the person to even recognize that there's a problem there. I believe I'm fervent that there are a lot of problems that various different departments in the town don't realize that they have because they don't have the data. We certainly don't have the data. And so this is where we can help as sort of helping facilitate and being a catalyst and helping those departments maybe potentially collect the data. So I have reached out to a lot of the department heads, and everyone who I approached, including police, including fire, including rec department, including family services, including council on aging, they love the idea of participating in a town-wide survey. They love the idea of and this is where there's sort of a global optimization, local versus global. On a local level, each one maybe doesn't have the resources to go out and get a survey account and figure out what good survey questions look like, and then to send it out and so forth. And then, of course, if they do that, our citizens are going to get survey fatigue because they're getting different surveys at different times from different departments, and some are good, some are poor. And this is where I do think that the technology committee can act as a catalyst, because we want to do our own survey for technology reasons. And if we want to give other departments real estate on that and use the same volunteers who we have standing by, people who are number crunchers or help draft the survey and review it, then it's something I think that we can come together, work together, in being a catalyst and helping these different groups come together on a unified townwide survey. I think it's sort of all together we can do much more than individual departments sort of doing their own thing.
Matt?
Yeah.
Could I make a comment about Will's comment?
Yeah, please.
Will, I agree with you in large part. I've got many bruises myself in terms of projects that have tried to get the technology far in front of the real world. And I guess I do see it as sort of a parallel process. I think there's value in having at least some set of standards and principles or whatever out there for people to at least consider and think about in the absence of other guidance. And there's a lot of absence of guidance around the town. And I think that the idea of implementation is a critical one. And in fact, we've talked about, I think before you joined the Master Plan Committee, Will, we spent a fair amount of time talking about how we're going to find enough things to do that make a difference, and particularly versus the 2008 effort. So I think we've got a fair amount of latitude and support for finding projects that can generate some traction in the relatively near term. And I think a key part of that could certainly be a project that includes a role for technology development. In fact, we could push for that and more or less make that happen, to say, here's a project that technology ought to be helpful for. Here are the kind of resources that we would look for support from, and get whatever departmental support, et cetera, needed to be organized for that, and at least have one or maybe more projects that fit that model as a test process and demonstrate how all that can work together. I think that would be a very useful implementation step here. So I think we've got great opportunity to guide that at this point over the next couple of months as we're trying to put the final pieces of the plan together. So I think that's helpful, and I'll certainly push with you for that. And you never know, there's never a perfect choice in terms of that, but I think anything that demonstrates how technology and other resources can work together to get a good result would be very helpful as we go forward to motivate people to try that same thing again if we can make that successful.
Yeah,
I love the survey idea too, as a way to coordinate a lot of surveys that go on. My comment on the survey, I think you need to figure out how to connect with the schools on that, because they do some of that themselves. And I think one of our great failures in 2008 plan was we completely ignored the schools, who were close to 70% of our budget. So minor oversight that I think we would have done much better to focus a little more attention on. So I think working with them, they've got their hands full, obviously, these days. But I think that finding ways to coordinate with them around the survey and other technology things is very helpful. I know they've been elusive in terms of participation in this committee. but I continue to hope that they will be more supportive going forward. So again, no perfect solution, but I think everybody's sort of aiming in the same direction, which is encouraging.
And one of the things that makes all of this very tricky, and is possibly one of our challenges, is that dealing with technology sort of is this tightrope between figuring out when you're following and when you're leading. You don't want technology to just assume that they're leading, because then you end up with neat solutions that don't necessarily solve problems. And you want some amount of it to be a matter of following. That is, that people in various areas uncover the fact that they have solutions that, or they have problems that need technology solutions, and we can provide assistance in terms of pointing them in the right direction or consulting or whatever. But the flip side is that a lot of the people are not technologists, and there's the old saw that if 15 years ago Apple had done a survey asking people how to make music listening better, the result would have been that they would have found a way to make CDs smaller, as opposed to inventing the iPod. I mean, inventing the iPod rather than making CDs smaller was something that required somebody to actually lead in terms of solving the problem, as opposed to following what people were asking for. And it's always that tightrope. And I think that part of our goal needs to be to figure out for any given issue which side of that we need to be on. I think, for example, that one of the things that we spent a fair amount of time on early on was the fiber project. I mean, we spent several hours over the course of several meetings, and that had an advocate in Tom, and ignoring the fact that there are still some people who don't believe that was the right way to go. I personally believe it was. I believe that it's saving us both time and money in terms of not having to have 5 different internet services. And more importantly, though, and this is where the leadership part is, I believe that the need for bandwidth is something that's going to just continue to grow exponentially. And one of the things that Southborough can say now is that we effectively have an infinite amount of bandwidth between our major facilities. I mean, nothing's infinite, but we have 96 pair of fiber split across a half a dozen buildings, and that's almost an infinite amount of bandwidth, and that will slowly get used. I mean, I have little doubt the way the world is going, especially as we move more and more to cloud services, more and more to ensuring that everything is online. All the stuff we were talking about with Jim, of taking 300 years worth of records and scanning them and storing them online. Now that all meetings are not just handwritten minutes, but they're actually 2 hours of video. I mean, that bandwidth will be needed, and I thought that was a really forward-looking approach to solving the problem. There are going to be a number of those, and one of the goals is to ensure that that the solution isn't simply smaller CDs.
But Larry, I would look at that a little differently in this, and I think that's a good example. But if you actually use a survey to understand what people want, and if the answer to the question for Apple was, I want a better way, more convenient way to listen to music, as opposed to I want a smaller CD kind of thing, then you sort of raise the level of the question, you get to the right question, and we're able then to think, are there technological means to actually get them what they really want, although it may not be exactly the question that was asked on the survey or whatever. So if you can take survey data and try to generalize it some, I think it's not a perfect solution, but that's a useful exercise to figure out, again, how to answer the right question and then focus on whether technology can help.
Well, one of the problems, and I agree with you completely, but one of the problems, I see it all the time, is that when you ask people, and part of this is going to be how the surveys are worded. That's always a problem. But when you ask people what the problem is, what they tell you is what they want the solution to be.
Right.
And that's always frustrating. And I've been through this a million times in my life. But you basically say, what's the problem you have with X? And the answer is, well, I really want it to be this big, as opposed to, well, I want it to be this big because the problem I have is that the thing I'm trying to put into it doesn't fit. And I really need to fit this thing into whatever I'm doing. And part of the trick of the survey has to be to try to encourage people however we do it. And it's a really hard problem to explain what the problem is, not what the solution is, because what Sam was saying is correct. If we got people to say, we need a more convenient way to listen to music, then the answer wouldn't necessarily be, well, we need smaller CDs. But people's sort of natural response is, well, I've got a Walkman and the Walkman is this big and I'd really like the Walkman to be that big. So if you could make the CD smaller, you'd solve all of my problems. So, I mean, this is all an analogy, but it is the kind of problem you have with technology all the time. And that's going to be one of our challenges. It's one of the more interesting problems to solve, but
We
it is
also have a variety of different stakeholders. So we have the residents, we have the town employees, we have the local businesses, we have the schools. I think you're likely to hear very different things from all of those different constituents. As a town employee, I might be just very concerned about the state of my laptop that I'm trying to do my day job on. If I'm a parent, my biggest issue is I have no idea when the school buses are going to show up in front of my house, and I need a web tracking app that tells me when the school buses are going to be there. So I think we've talked about having these segmented surveys in the past, narrowing in on those specific stakeholders so that we're getting clear results back from those groups, because I do think they'll end up ultimately being very different.
Yeah, fully agreed. The current survey, which I shared,
It's segmented.
is the segment. It's specifically for actually the citizens, divided up by general town service. But I completely agree that we need to create a completely separate one for the employees, one for the businesses, and possibly schools. We should discuss with schools what they want to see there.
One thing I'd just like to put out there is that we need to remember that in areas like police, fire, real estate, all of that stuff, there are lots of vendors out there who are proposing solutions. And, frankly, I don't know, it was funny when we were talking to the police chief, he was throwing out a lot of different things that he's been looking at in terms of communication and coordination and also the accounting and the training. And all of that is sort of a big range of different packages or solutions he could buy. And, one thing that I think we could do is we could help departments to say, okay, if you want to go with this solution, maybe it's going to require that, that the town have certain databases or certain types of access so that this solution can then be plugged in. That could be a place where we could help them to maybe choose the solution that's going to fit well, or at least help them to determine how difficult it's going to be to get that solution in here.
You mean like requirements for open APIs and whatever it authenticates via Active Directory?
Right, exactly. If they're going to be talking about, for instance, all of this communication that they want to do, and the fire trucks want to be able to roll up and actually be able to essentially see what the firefighters are seeing with webcams off of their lapels, and then have all of that plugged into maybe and coordinated with the police or with other fire departments. That's obviously going to take a certain amount of underlying substrate or architecture or facilities so that they'd be able to bring that in. If they just brought it in, and it might turn out that, hey, it's going to cost a lot of money, or maybe, you guys are going to build a special purpose one-off solution to plug this in. Whereas if you'd talked to us, or we'd been, a little bit more active in getting out to you, we could have helped you figure out, hey, DPW is going to need a similar kind of thing. Fire, police, they need it. Maybe there are other services in the town that could also get onto that as well. So I guess it's, the example that Larry was talking about, the links, the fiber links. Obviously that's something that can then be used across many different departments for many different purposes. So I would just say
that type of guidance something we want to put in the strategy document, or would that be a separate document that provides that kind of guidance to those town departments?
Well, I would say that in the strategy document, we should really be saying, how is the technology going to relate to the rest of the town? How is the technology and technologist and this committee or whatever going to be helping, to guide, or at least to aid, these different departments in going in the directions that they need to go. I mean, we don't necessarily know all of the requirements that the police need to fit into. They're constantly changing. What the fire department wants to do in terms of disaster recovery or linking to other departments. And so I think one of the main things in our strategy is that we need to be getting out and talking to these guys and saying, hey, what are you considering, or what's happening in your field? How could we help you to sort of assess, some of the technology dimensions and the fit with what else the town is doing? And in some cases, what we may decide is, hey, you know what? We need to change what the town is doing because we're not fitting in the right direction.
What you're making me think about is the concept around, certain technology is run the business technology. And then there's other technology that I would call more service-oriented technology. I wonder if we need in the strategy to have, more of a segmented focus on what are our recommendations around run the town technology, and then what are other more residential types of services that should be a different type of focus within the strategy.
Possibly, we should avoid particular technologies, obviously, and let's start at the principal level, and then we see how deep it's appropriate to go, because technology is always changing and needs are always changing. What's most important is that we stay close to the data, we have a constant feedback mechanism, and we focus on good, solid principles that don't change, like continuous improvement, continuous refinement, strong security. And of course, those principles will then lead down to particular choices, such as, strong security means we need to have better authentication system, better encryption at rest, encryption in transit, better data, principles around our moving things to the cloud means we have, that principle will drive down to what we do at the infrastructure level for redundant connectivity from all of our buildings and all that and so forth. Yeah.
I think, one thing we might want to put in the strategic plan is just that the role of this committee should really be one to get out and really understand what these different departments are doing or need, and have some metrics about that. I mean, how often are we meeting with them? What kind of are we generating the right documents to maybe document our understanding of what they've told us. And then, that way other people can take a look at them. But it means that we have gone out and done the due diligence to say, our ideas about architecture, our ideas about where we need to be moving the town, do they really work when we get out into the more real world and the implementation?
I think that's very, very critical. And it's something we're obviously doing. We discussed this, and this is the reason why we're inviting department heads to come to us, or we're discussing with them one-on-one, as opposed to going through just the town IT person. And we want to continue that. And I think we should mention that or a nod to that in the plan, that this is our goal. But the plan doesn't necessarily need to say our plan is to talk to people, because we're just going to do it. I mean, that's whether we put it in a plan or not, we're going to continue doing it because we like good feedback and like. So,
Matt,
Sam,
I would suggest that's I think strongly agree with that, but I think there's also an interesting connection down sort of to the operational level in terms of more standardization across functionality. I offer a couple of interesting examples. One, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, we bought a permitting system that turned out to be only usable by one department because nobody talked to the other departments. We then replaced that 2 or 3 years ago, and it's working better, but it's still not very widely used as I understand it. And so some ability to understand across departments who are doing permitting, what the need is, how to find the right infrastructure to be able to support that. I think, again, the technology committee could offer some valuable input there. I think you've got sort of the not homegrown necessarily, but silo kind of thing going where the rec department actually has what appears to be a pretty good program sign-up software set now. And what they found is other people are now using it. Youth and Family Services has started using it to sign up for their programs. Others are looking at it to sign up for their programs. And so Tim Davis is sort of running a software empire there, selling service to
Go rec department.
I'm waiting for him to start charging for it. But and I think it's a pretty good system. I use it and it seems to work pretty well. But I think that came out of Tim's history in his prior job. And so again, the ability to sort of look across departments and sort of match the high level to the low level and make sure that all those things are fitting and we're making smart decisions in terms of the generic function that will serve the most departments most effectively is another place where the technology committee could serve an integrating role. Not that you're responsible for making the software choice, but that you're sort of overseeing the issues and nudging people, reminding them that, hey, this is going on in all these places. And again, if we have a good next IT manager, that's the role that kind of person would serve as well, to understand what's happening and identifying those opportunities and then consulting with you folks to figure out how do we make the right choices. So a lot of moving parts there, but I think that we've got some good ongoing opportunities there to look at, as well as the high level structural issues. So again,
Sam,
the other area that
go ahead, Larry.
The other area that I think it's going to be important for us to strike a good balance on is sort of technology that's sort of under the covers and technology that's externally visible. I mean, most of what we've been talking about to some extent is technology. I mean, through the life of this committee is technology that's sort of under the covers. But I mean, just as a good example that Angela brought up is, I can track where my Uber is. Why can't I track where my school bus is? Why can't I look at a website in real time to find out what the waiting time is at an election site right now? I mean, I'm not saying that those are the right things, but those are the kinds of things that are above the covers, not below the covers. Dealing with infrastructure like fiber is critically important, but it's below the covers. I mean, it's not something that on a day-to-day basis affects the residents of the town. Knowing where your school bus is or knowing how long the line is at a polling site are things that affect real live citizens in their home, on the appropriate, I was going to say every day, but election day isn't every day, but on the appropriate days. I think that in terms of getting citizen buy-in for technology, and let's face it, it's the citizens who end up paying for all of this in the end, there needs to be some amount of the technology that really does show up on top of the covers, not under the covers. Otherwise, it's oh, you need another 3 servers, or you need another 2 printers, or you need another
Wi-Fi access point. Yeah, which
well,
don't care. Yeah.
Right. And,
go ahead, Larry.
no, I'm done. I've made my point. Thank you.
I think the school bus example is great, but what I would say is that, as technologists, we should be going to other departments and saying, hey, we're going to be tracking school buses, vehicles, DPW, you got some vehicles you want us to track the location of, emergency services, you want us to track the locations of your fire trucks and your ambulances so that, sort of everybody knows where they are, where the police are. That's a cross-cutting concern that could actually, if we bought the right solution, could be used by multiple departments. we certainly don't want to keep doing the case where we buy something and it works great for Department A, but it turns out it's not good for pretty much anybody else.
But Larry makes a great point, because again, I think it's a little crass, but you got to get town meeting to fund stuff. And so I think I would be inclined to work hard to include at least some of the above the covers stuff that you can go sell to town meeting and say, here's the kind of things that if you fund this, it's going to affect your daily life, make life a little better for you. And because you need that kind of support, unfortunately. And for those of us who are longtime town meeting observers, it doesn't take many folks to stand up and rant about something or other to send a vote in a different direction. So you've got to at least play to the crowd a little bit there. Not that that's the only game you want to play, but I think that that's an important aspect of proposals going forward. So I certainly encourage that.
Yeah, so I completely agree with everything that's being said here. And I think the general themes are, we need to make sure that the plan includes under the covers, over the covers. I don't know if those are the right terms or other terms, but we all know what it refers to completely. Sort of the internal, the things that are not seen on a daily basis to a regular citizen, as well as those things that the regular citizens are affected by day in, day out. And I completely agree with Will about, absolutely, we should be involved in all of these purchasing decisions and the technology investigation decisions. And I think Tom did a good job of that, and we probably could do even better. I'm expecting our new town IT person, whoever that is, to include us in those decision-making processes, because we have visibility and we will help them get visibility across different departments. So they're not siloed decisions. They're more holistic decisions that are made. And I love your example, Will, of the position tracking of vehicles. Yeah, that's something we should do across all town vehicles, right? If one department's doing it, and especially technology is so cheap nowadays. So,
and there are a lot of other things that you can name that are not quite so apparent, but security, that's something that's a cross-cutting concern that we want to make sure that all of our investments are coordinated. Backups, the cloud thing, it's really sort of a way to get superior uptime, and also to get superior uptime without spending a fortune on it, right?
But it should be done also, to your point, Will, it should be also be done in a consistent manner, because cloud can be a blessing or a curse, right?
Right, exactly.
If everybody can go off and spend their credit card number, then you have proliferation of websites, which we have. I don't know how many websites, domain names we have registered, and how many departments are running their own site and their own services, their own life cycle, and with their own authentication and governance. It's actually sort of become a nightmare to do. So we want to bring consistency to it, and you sort of unify the requirements and where possible. So yeah, and I would just say that if we don't do that, we can end up with the situation that we have with the fiber connecting the major buildings, which is that we have some people who are seriously disagreeing that what we did was at all reasonable or correct. And maybe if we made a better case, we wouldn't be running into that, right?
Yeah, right. And part of that again is under the cover stuff. Somebody needs to choose a good CMS and one that allows some segmentation, so different committees can have responsibility for their portion, but everybody's using the same CMS. So there is some set of standards and templates that are already defined. There's a common look, there's a common domain. That takes some amount of leadership and somebody who really cares about it, but it's certainly not an insurmountable problem. And somebody just needs to drive that. But I think that's an important one. But a lot of that is under the covers, and some of it ends up being above the covers in terms of people being able to find stuff, which affects real live people.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Angela. No, you go ahead.
Just a quick question. I don't believe that there's anything that exists within the town like a collaboration software, like an MS Teams, where all department heads would have access, and you could do something simple like a share best practices type of forum or a Q&A type of forum. But is there any manual meeting where those folks are brought together on an ongoing basis to discuss these types of issues? Or is it really the technology committee just going department by department by department and interviewing them and trying to kind of pull these strings together?
My understanding, it was on an ad hoc basis. Tom started playing with teams, and but again, it was ad hoc. There was
There,
no sort of consistency. Sorry, go
there are
ahead.
department head meetings periodically, but they're more
Yeah.
focused on, policies and that kind of stuff. I think that's been one of our long-term shortcomings. I guess I look at the town administrator to drive those kind of things. That hasn't been happening.
One thing that we might want to do as a technology committee is to have, sort of a workshop where we invite the key people from across different departments, and we talk about some of these cross-cutting concerns like the CMS or security, or your cloud approach, or your backup approach, or your high availability approach, your great geographical information system approach, and maybe we could enlighten them, or get them thinking about, hey, if I'm going to go out and choose a package, I really should be making certain that's going to fit in with what other people might need, or getting them to buy what I might need, right?
That could be something that would be really helpful for the new IT person also as part of their orientation.
And with Zoom, that's a lot easier than it has been historically, certainly. So, I mean, that's one of the perverse good things about pandemic. You could actually make that happen pretty easily. So.
Yeah. Okay, I know we only have a couple minutes left, running out of time. And I want to make
Matt,
sure we.
Could I just say thank you for including me in the discussion. I appreciate the chance to weigh in
Thanks
here.
for joining, Sam. I know you're a partner. And for everybody who's aware, Sam sits on the Board of Selectmen, and he's been appointed sort of to as a liaison to the Technology Committee. So we appreciate Sam's time.
And it's valuable for me tonight, too, because I've learned from Mr. Hegarty that I have some interesting job opportunities with the RMV and Secretary of State. Long dormant COBOL skills. I
skills or
did a lot of COBOL programming in the old days.
Label fixing skills. Yeah.
Sam, you would be very surprised to learn how many people need that, how many firms need that.
I thought I was unemployable, but there's hope for me.
Your environmental division.
I also know Fortran, so.
Okay, so in the last couple minutes here, I want to make sure we get to the next steps. So Angela, what are your thoughts on the next steps, and what would you like for the committee to do to help move this forward?
So we had talked about taking this initial draft and maybe doing some divide and conquer. If we could lay out the different groups that we wanted to solicit feedback from, maybe we could each take, a few of those groups and talk to them about the technology strategy, get their input, and bring that back to the January meeting so that we could, well, actually, ideally, we would bring the feedback back before so that we could reiterate, get a draft 2, and then get that out to the group so that we would be discussing that second draft on the next meeting. Would folks be open to doing that?
So let's talk about the different constituents. We're talking about there's departments in the town, and there's of course boards and committees. I think this is mostly focused on the town departments. Is that accurate?
Well, I had done a similar exercise. I went through and tried to guess, like, what are all the committees that might be relevant and what are all the departments? And I mean, it's actually quite a few. I mean, the ones that I picked out that I thought might have some level of input were Planning Board, Youth Commission, Master Planning Committee, Advisory Committee, Board of Selectmen, School Board, and Council on Aging. And then you've got the Facilities Department, the Fire Department, the Police, Recreation, School, Town Admin, and Youth and Family Services. And then maybe like a few citizens who've been vocal about technology matters in the past. There might be some folks like that we want to touch base with.
Yeah, sounds like a good group.
Is that overly ambitious? It's a lot of different groups, but if we divide it up and conquered, it might just be like 3 or 4 per person.
Sounds good to me. Larry and Will, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a potential solution. If we were going to do that, it seems to me that we would probably want to discuss a strategy first, so that we're asking the same kinds of questions and trying to evoke the same information from different people, because if we all go off in different directions, then it's going to be hard to integrate the results. But I would certainly have no trouble or no problem with doing a few of those.
If I drafted out some questions, then I could send out via email like what the questions were, along with, I guess, just assigning some of these groups out per person.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is there's no way for us to have a discussion because we can't respond to your email.
Right. How do we do that with the open meeting laws, Matt? Do you have a guidance on that?
Yeah, I guess basically we couldn't have a discussion. There couldn't be any. I think that if this is purely a matter of collection, Angela, you could create make the assignments in terms of who's going out to who and what the general question list, and we can then, we won't have any discussion about what the question. We'll just have to go verbatim off of that because it'll be outside the meeting. We'll go through the different groups, collect information, and then feed it back to you. I think it's okay to feed back their feedback to you, and then we'll make it all part of our meeting record for our next meeting, and we'll go through that in depth in our next meeting. So basically walking through the feedback we received from all these departments, that'll be the discussion for our next meeting. So
Great. Okay. The other question I had was, I know you said that the new person would probably start at the beginning of January. Town meeting is March. Do we need to do anything on the 2021 budget?
that's going to have to wait until that person starts.
That person starts. Okay, so we won't deal with that until they're there.
So it's probably going to be a March, a February thing that we review. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I will put all that into email.
Great.
Along with suggested timelines. So you'll get timelines, assignments, questions, and then you'll give the information back to me. I'll do a second draft and then send that back out to folks for review. Okay.
Sounds good.
And you might want to recommend, given that we're going to be effectively interviewing people, we probably want to agree on a length of time. In other words, I don't want to call up 3 people and say, I need a half hour of your time, and have Matt call up 3 people and say, I want an hour and a half of your time. And, so we ought to come to either some agreement, which I don't care if it's by fiat, if you just want to pick a number, but we ought to, basically say, okay, we're going to do half-hour interviews or whatever, just so they're roughly in the same ballpark. Of course, they can end up being a little shorter or a little longer, but at least we're sort of centered around.
I think 30 minutes feels appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's good.
That's what I would shoot for. If I were making it up, that's what I'd probably ask for.
That makes sense. Okay. Is there anything else that we're missing that we need?
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
I know we ran out of time, but I'm going to flash on my screen this.
You put it on the screen, and I'm going to have to include it in the minutes.
Well, no, it'll be the survey.
I'm only fooling. I've got the file. I can include it.
Yeah. So basically, as an FYI, this is copied verbatim from the survey instrument of Kansas City, Missouri, and they gave me authorization. They said it's public domain to use these questions, and they've been using this for a number of years. So most of these questions are just copied verbatim, because I don't claim to be a statistician or a survey designer, and I know there's the way you phrase questions is very critical and so forth. So most of these questions are copied verbatim. I did pull out in the Youth and Family Services. They supplied me the questions that they were interested in. So I copied those
Okay.
verbatim into here. I think they may need a little bit of massaging, but I just want to see if anybody had any high-level comments or questions about the strategy here. I'm basically we're reaching out to various department heads to say, hey, what do you want to do with your portion of the survey? Do you like Kansas City, Missouri's questions? Yes or no? If they don't, what other questions they have? What different questions are they interested in? This is a section, municipal technology section. This would be sort of our own section, right? This is our page. This is rate your satisfaction with the following town services provided by the town Southborough. It's the website, the specific department websites, committee meetings, online payments of taxes, fees, calendar events, Facebook page, Twitter feed, Wi-Fi connectivity, and we can expand this or adjust it as needed, as desired. And then there's some open questions of, what are you seeking when you try to use the services, and what is the best way to get information about Southborough, and what other technical services do you wish the town would offer? So a few open-ended ones. Any comments on that?
It looks like a really good start. I mean, I skimmed through it quickly earlier also. And given that it's, in a sense, it's sort of tested to some extent since it's been being used by a fairly large city for some period of time. That's a little bit more comforting also, because it is hard to compose surveys. So
I do think the verbatims are going to be quite telling. So where we have the opportunity to, like on 22 and 23, make those, I don't know if the gray bar signifies a short answer versus a long answer, but where we could give people some space to make sure that they're able to type in what they want. I think that could give us some quite helpful information.
Yeah, it has they have basically a text box, which is short, and a single
Text
comment
box long.
It's basically long versus short. So we can make all of these comment boxes, which is longer responses. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll just continue reaching out to departments, and then hopefully by our next meeting, or next maybe February at the most, we'll have standardized this and then start getting it out there. I mean, the dream would be have some survey out to all the citizens before town meeting, get some level of insight back. But that's a dream. Hopefully.
Would we post
we'll
the link on the town website and then just market it across different
Yes.
formats? And
Yes. Okay. My Southborough. Yeah, very
it's not doing a mailing or anything like that.
No.
People don't have the option to do it in hard copy versus online.
Yeah.
It's just all online, the whole thing.
Yeah, I started looking to that like a
sense.
hybrid service for hard copy, because we do have some particularly more senior citizens that may be online, but given the cost and complexity of doing that, decided let's maybe just start with this and see where we go. Yeah.
How do we get the word out then? I mean, I think you're right, but how do you get the word out to people that there's a survey?
So, yeah, we need to think about, so I was thinking about, obviously, any of the town services themselves on the town website, my Southborough Facebook page, Twitter feed.
There's some community interest, Facebook groups, SOBO parent share and care, stuff like that we could advertise it on.
Boards and committees, council on aging.
Vanessa put a couple of comments in. She said we can share on department listservs and town social media accounts and things like that.
Awesome.
My Southborough.
Yeah.
My Southborough blog.
Yeah.
Hang a flyer in Morrow's.
If we time it around, there was some issues, some things that we were able to include with tax and water bills, but if we timed around that, could we include an insert in either the tax or water bills?
That's how they did the census or something recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, but you've really got to get in on that early. I mean, we tried to do that for the cable TV committee, and we were too late. Someone had already grabbed the spot. The other thing we did with the cable TV committee's survey like this is that we put notices at the library and the town hall and all the places that people aren't going right now. I would wonder if it would be feasible for us to actually put something up at the post office, because a number of people do go by that. I don't know what the regulations are like though on that particular issue.
And the transfer station.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
That's the social hub of the town, even with COVID.
yeah, but that's another place. It used to be that everybody went to the swap shop, but that's another place that people aren't going right now. Right. Yeah, they got closed. So, but yeah, those are the kinds of things. What I would say is that I think we got under 100 responses for the cable TV committee. So, trying to get a lot of participation is tough. It's a tough thing.
This is where I'm hoping that because it's going to be combined, we can leverage not only the departments to supply questions, but also the support and the publicity of the different departments in promoting the survey.
So every time they hand out a speeding ticket, they can also hand out a notice about participate in this survey.
Exactly.
Right.
What do they do for the gobble wobble? There's like the kiosk right at the intersection of 85 and 30 where at St. Mark's, they had like a kiosk that every time you drove by it, it would, talk about the gobble wobble or something. I mean, we could get creative in some ways.
Yeah. These are great ideas. And so I'll start maybe collecting ideas. This is the survey instrument. Then I'll start creating a document of the publicity and how to get it. And these are some things I'll feed into that and we can discuss in the next meeting. So with that being said, let's pull out our calendars if we could and find a time that would work for our next meeting. Typically, we've done it on, I think, the third Wednesday of every month, or at least that's our de facto time. So how is everybody's January, say the 20th, looking for people?
I might be drunk after the inauguration, but sure. Then nobody's invited me to DC, so.
Not yet. Could be.
That's fine.
Do we want to shift it to a different day because of the inauguration? Would that be preferable? Or?
I don't see any reason. I mean, that's me speaking, but I don't see any reason.
How does that work for you, Will and Angela?
Yeah, the 20th is fine.
Yeah, the 20th would be fine, as long as they don't declare martial law at that time.
Well, if they do, we won't have anything else to do. We might as well meet.
All right, sounds great. All right, I'll send out a meeting invite. I assume that before there were only 2 Zoom meetings we had to negotiate with other committees on. I heard just before Tom left, and Vanessa, I think, is still on, can correct me if I'm wrong, but we now have 3 Zoom meetings of the town, so the likelihood of conflict is low. So I will send out a meeting invite for 7 to 9 p.m. on the 20th and go from there. Okay, in the meantime, we'll look forward to, Angela, your email on how to divide and conquer and hopefully get some data for our next meeting. But with that being said, thank you everyone for joining. Is there anything else we should cover for today before we close?
No, I move adjournment.
Second.
Okay, great. Okay, let's do a roll call vote to adjourn. Will?
Sorry, I thought I was muted. Yes, I vote adjourn.
Great. Larry?
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
No, you can't do all in favor because it has to be
Roll call.
Yeah, so
Oh,
Larry.
okay. Aye.
Okay, Angela.
Aye.
And I also. Yeah, unfortunately, because it's a virtual meeting, we have to do roll call. Can't just do all in favor. But,
Right. Yeah.
thanks, everyone.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Have a
Okay.
great
Thank
set
you.
of holidays, and we'll
Thanks.
chat next
Happy
time.
Yeah.
holidays.
Thanks.
Yep. Have a great holiday. Good New Year.
Yeah.
See you all in.
2021.
Bye-bye.